Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? Yes. Awesome. All right, so we're going to try not to put you to sleep right after lunch. We are not going to be talking about the stuff that the other breakouts are talking about email subject lines and tactical. We're actually going to be talking about something very different here, hopefully something you haven't heard elsewhere. Your programs say 5 critical outbound metrics. Sorry about that. We changed up at the last minute. We wanted to be respectful of your time, so we killed 2 of them. So without further ado, let's get started here. I'll begin. My name's Taft Love. I'm the VP of Sales at DocSend. Has anybody heard of DocSend? All right, awesome. Good to see a few people that are familiar. And
I'm Chris Bryson. I do field sales over at Dropbox these days, but worked with Taft for many years building world-class sales development teams, and really excited to talk about the operational side of that with all of you today.
All right, so a bit of history about us. So we worked together to build sales development at PandaDoc and Smart Recruiters, and then have done consulting together over the years. So, geez, this is really messed up. The PDF is way better, I promise. It's not all wonky. So we've led 5 teams across 4 cities, and when I say led, I mean built and led. We've hired more than 50 SDRs together, generated at least 150 million in AE pipeline, and with consulting, we've built and improved lots of other SDR teams. And what Chris was a bit too humble to mention is that after we stopped working together, he left Smart Recruiters to go build sales development at SignalFX, which, if anybody has been listening to the news, had a very good week. Anyway, please.
Yeah.
All
So
right.
this is really why we're here today, and I think this will resonate with anyone that's coming to an SDR-specific conference, and it's the up-level to function. And if you've worked in this space for a while, you've probably heard a lot of people say, we need to do this. You've probably wanted to do it, but what you lack is the ability to come and really take the seat at the table. So what we're going to go through today is how to do that with the 3 metrics that we're going to review, but also we're going to take you on a journey of how to get there and how to build that out specifically.
All right, so who is this for? In terms of where people sit in the organization, it's for everyone. If you're an SDR and you aspire to leadership in sales, this is for you. If you're a current leader or an executive, you should pay very close attention, because these are the questions you should be asking of your sales team and your sales development team specifically. And this is the part where it's not for everyone. If you're doing inbound, these metrics aren't going to matter to you as much. This is for focused outbound prospecting. Anybody here do enterprise or big mid-market prospecting? Okay, great. This is for you guys.
Yeah, so really the issue with this is what that outbound sales development is, as Taft said, it's very different than the inbound side, but measuring it is incredibly difficult. You don't have that seat at the table, and often the data that you need to do it can be really messy. You can't quantify it, and it's a huge problem for a lot of teams that we talk to. And it was one that I personally have struggled over the 3 companies that I worked at, being able to build that out and bring it to execs and tell a story with numbers and be able to ask for resources. So with that, we'll start getting into it now.
Yeah, so a VP of sales. Anybody here a VP of sales? Okay, so you guys, if you're qualified, you can answer some very basic questions. If I give you $1 million of pipeline, how much revenue will you give me? Of course, there may be some nuance to that, but ultimately, if you can't answer that, you're not doing your job, right? And you really only need to know a few things. At the very highest level, when you step into a board meeting, they don't care how many calls your reps make, right? When I go to a board meeting, they want to know these things. And if you know what the sales velocity rate is, those are elements of sales velocity. And so this is a critical metric. And again, the PDF, when you get it, I checked it. It's way better than this. I don't know what happened in this format, but trust me, the one you get after will look better. Sales velocity rate is number of ops times average op value times your win rate divided by time. And what it tells you is how much revenue are you generating at any given time. This is a critical metric. And if you can't answer this, or you may not know what the sales velocity rate is, but if you don't know these metrics, you're probably not doing your job well.
Yeah, and if you're an SDR leader, it doesn't, end with you getting beat up by the VP of sales asking why you don't know your stuff. It's on the marketing side too, and it's simple. If you're a VP of marketing, you know your budget, you know how much you need to spend, you know exactly, what your cost per lead is. It's simple math, and then you know your lead to MQL conversion ratio because that's probably what you get paid on. So you want to make sure that your SDR leader's following up with that, and it's an easy formula to say, hey, if we spend this much money, we get this many MQLs, and you convert them at this rate, this is what's going to happen. And they can take that to the executive chamber and be able to review that with the board, anybody else that needs to know it, but it's not so easy from the outbound side. So with that, these are some of the, oh, we skipped a,
Nope.
you went back? Okay.
There we go. So the outbound funnel, there's a big question mark here because most companies, there are some exceptions here, but most companies have no idea what's in this funnel. Now, to have a funnel, you need a top, middle, and a bottom. Everyone knows the bottom of the funnel, right? How many meetings did we get last month? How much pipeline did we get? But what's the top of the funnel? It's actually not an easy question to answer. Is it when we start researching a company we want to target? Is it when we choose a target? Is it when we start sending emails? What is it, right? It's a hard question to answer that a lot of people don't think about. And so here's what they do focus on.
Yeah, so if you're an SDR manager, director, or an SDR yourself, these are things that you focus on all day. They're all extremely tactical, right? Call volume, your call to connect ratios, your conversations, and your meeting set rate, how many meetings you set, how many emails that got open, how many got replied. And then, the results metrics are a bit better, right? So pipeline created, even closed revenue, but it doesn't speak to building a machine and a formula like your counterparts have.
So we sort of gave you the answer before asking the question, but what's missing? Well, what's missing is a funnel. Yeah, there's absolutely no funnel in most companies. I do consulting for operations for lots of companies, and what I see over and over and over again is people treat things that are not inputs. They treat resources as inputs. Well, last quarter I had 4 reps and they generated $400,000 in revenue, or in pipeline rather. Well, if you want $500,000 in pipeline, I guess I need 5 reps. That's a problem though. Reps are not the top of your funnel. Reps are a resource. And so we need a way to quantify all of the steps in the funnel. So this is what's missing. An actual outbound funnel. So these specific things don't matter. You build your own funnel, but you need a funnel. So here's how I define these, and I'm going to go through and talk about what metrics live in this funnel. But activated, engaged, meeting set, and qualified. For most companies, qualified equals a new opportunity. For some companies, they may consider their finish line when it enters pipeline. So there's some nuance here that's specific to your company, but you need a funnel. And so let's get to the actual metrics. And man, is this wonky. The actual metrics, the first one is activated accounts per opportunity.
Can you go back to that previous slide? I just wanted to...
Yeah, you got it. There you go. Yeah, and so...
Thank God this one looks good.
Yeah, this one looks good. This was a copy-paste, that's why. So yeah, and everyone will get a better formatted version of this via PDF when we're done. So metric 1, this is an important one. Activated accounts per opportunity. So really, really important here. You have to define active. You have to have a clear definition for what the top of your funnel is. And self-reported is not okay. And so if you cannot run a report, a trustworthy, accurate report telling you how many new accounts entered your funnel over a given period of time, then you don't have a funnel. And activation should be your North Star. And you'll see why in a minute with what I believe will become the ultimate sales development metric for board meetings once sales development earns a seat at the table. And then this one's just a bit of nuance, but you may have different values for different segments. So for you, it might be industries. For another company, it might be mid-market versus enterprise. But just remember, you can slice this by whatever metric you feel is important to differentiate very different metrics. So You don't want to blend activation in mid-market where you're doing really high volume activation with enterprise where your reps are doing it very slowly. Average opportunity value. This is another one. This one's pretty obvious. You need to know what the average opportunity is worth. Again, separate values for separate segments. If you blend your mid-market and enterprise values, you may find that the math won't work for you. This is a big one. Only factor in outbound opportunities. I talk to outbound teams, and they say, well, our average opportunity is 30,000, but they're targeting companies that, if sold, are worth 150,000. So focus only on outbound for this metric. And until you can actually measure what an outbound opportunity is worth on average, be conservative. I talk to teams, they bring me in to do some consulting, and they say, oh, no, we're selling to Bosch. It's one of our targets. So with Bosch in there, our average is 250,000. But if you have a land and expand model, that might not be the case. So don't give yourself extra credit in order to make the math work. If the math doesn't work, then outbound doesn't work. And then outbound cycle time. This is simple. From the moment an account is activated on average until it enters the sales funnel, so qualified pipeline, new opportunity, whatever you consider the finish line for your funnel, how long does that take? I like to measure it in days. Some companies may find you need to measure it in weeks, months, whatever, but you need a consistent way to measure this. So for these three metrics so far, is there any confusion? Go ahead.
Can you go back to metric 1?
You got it.
Is that activated accounts that result into the opportunity?
Nope, all activated accounts. So what I'm looking for here is total activated accounts divided by the number of opportunities that result from all activated accounts. So what we're looking at is an outbound win rate, right? We're just creating win rate for SDRs. Just like the VPs of sales need to know how many dollars of pipeline they need to make 100,000, I need to know as an SDR leader how many activated opportunities I need if I want 10 meetings. Shoot.
Detail on this, but how are you calculating that? You're looking at a window of 90 days or 6 months, or you're looking at activated this month or opportunities this month? Or?
So we're higher level than that, but the answer is you need to decide that. So if you have a really long outbound cycle, you might look at a year. If you need to figure out resourcing for next year, you might look at all time. So this is something you have to decide how to slice it based on your business.
What other triggers besides contacts do you use to define active?
So this depends on a few things. So first of all, you need to be thoughtful about how you define activated. I don't know if you guys feel this, but SDR world especially, there's this one size fits all mentality. Oh, these other guys do this thing, so that's how we do it now. You need to actually be thoughtful about your business. If you're prospecting into GE and Bosch and the biggest companies in the world, you might not consider an account activated until your SDR has talked to 5 people in 5 different parts of the business. If you're going way down market, you might say, you know what, first email out the door, it's active. You need to decide that for yourself.
This is awesome. I'm curious, is there a tool out there that can automate this for me, or do I need to build this myself? This is a lot of work. It's good stuff, but how am I going to be able to do this in my current business?
That is a great question. So you can do it in Excel right now. You can build a hacky version, which Chris and I did at Smart Recruiters, and I've done a couple times since.
It's a lot of fun to build in Salesforce.
It's a nightmare. So we're not supposed to pitch here, so I'm going to keep this super high level. I built this. It's why I talk about it, but the purpose isn't to sell my tool because it's like a side thing. It's a hobby. But email me after. I'll share whatever you want. I'm not going to pitch it here. But yeah, I built a solution for this. But what's more important is that you need to know you need to measure this more than before you even get to how you measure it. What I'm preaching here is people need to understand that sales development will never have a seat at the table until they can answer these questions. All right, and then I made this up, so might be totally wrong. It's not been very road tested, but outbound velocity rate. Jeez, this is bad. I'm sorry for the formatting here.
It looks okay over here, so the slides when they get sent out should look correct.
Got
it's
it.
Just something to do with the screen, I guess.
Cool. So outbound velocity rate, AAC. So that is your activated account capacity. So one of the reasons you need to know the number of activations per opportunity is so you can do resource planning. And so activated account capacity times active opportunities, activations per opportunity, which is your win rate, right? I'm literally plugging sales development numbers into the sales velocity rate, right? And then times your average opportunity value divided by time. So can anybody, despite the formatting, put together for me what that's going to tell us? So sales velocity tells you every day, if the time is days, then sales velocity tells you every day how much revenue your team is bringing in. So what is outbound velocity telling you? Exactly, how much pipeline your team is bringing every day. So if you can't answer this, the board doesn't want to talk to you. They don't care about how many phone calls you make. Yeah?
Can you double click on average account capacity, or how is that being defined?
Great question. So there's another element that needs to feed into this. So I actually like to use this to quota reps. So it's not the whole quota, but maybe an element of an SDR's quota when they're outbound is how many accounts are you activating per day, week, month, whatever your time horizon is. So if I expect, let's say I'm going real big enterprise and I expect 30 activations per month per rep, well, my capacity is that 30 times the number of reps. So now, and of course there's ramping and things you have to factor into this. There's nuance here that I'm leaving out intentionally, but that's the fundamental math. How are we doing on time?
We're good. We can keep going.
Cool.
We'll have time for Q&A.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, so I hope now we all can see why it actually matters. But at the highest level, it's to not just quantify what you're delivering as an SDR leader, but be able to project forward, right? So use this to plug into other things other than just how much pipeline you think you're going to get, but how much hiring you need to do. How much a specific territory can yield. There's a lot that you can do with it, and we're happy to talk more about that. But that's what we hope that you walk away from, is with a tool that you can use to do your planning and build more data-driven sales development teams.
So one thing I want to double click on here is this is something that the sales development world hasn't put together yet, mainly because we are guilty, and me included, it took me years to get to this. We are guilty of measuring the metrics that are easy to measure. So I can look in Outreach and see how many calls my team made. I can look in Outreach or Salesforce and see how many emails we sent or what my email response rate is. None of those matter at the highest level. None of those are board metrics. And so the reason for that, ultimately, is we sell to companies, not people. We're B2B, right? We sell to companies. So if your metrics don't speak to how you sell to companies in terms of size and win rate, or in this case, activated to opportunity rate, then your metrics don't really matter at the highest level. And I've heard people say, no, I can do 100, I know that 100 calls leads to one opportunity, so I can do this. I have a funnel, but you don't have a funnel, because what you're not factoring in is the fact that company A, you may talk to 5 people in the company and make 20 calls per person. That's 100 calls. Company B, you may talk to 2 people and make 6 calls each. That's 12 calls. So your funnel does not speak to companies. Your funnel speaks to activities. All right. Any questions, guys? I'm happy to answer anything you have.
How do you troubleshoot for shifting activated accounts to opportunities? Like, what are some of the tools you use to say, oh, actually, our formula is not spitting out what's actually occurring, and where do you first diagnose when that occurs?
So I think I understand your question. There is a thing you have to do here to measure all of this that sort of takes care of that,
Okay.
which is inbound has the lead object. So your lead object has everything you need to know about inbound leads, right? And so each lead, and of course this is not true for some companies that do inbound but account-based, but let's set aside the nuance for a second. If one person per company is all you're talking to, then a person is a company, right? So then your funnels are the same. So activity funnels and company funnels or account funnels are essentially the same thing. With outbound, you actually are talking to a lot of different people, doing a lot of different activities across 5 objects. And Salesforce, if you might have noticed this, it's good at displaying information across objects, but it's not good at calculating information across objects. Anybody here have Rollup Helper in your Salesforce? So Rollup Helper counts the number of other records in Salesforce that meet certain filters, right? And the reason Rollup Helper exists is because Salesforce is really bad at calculating cross-object stuff. So for example, well, you guys might not know this, but go home, ask your sales ops person, and they'll confirm this. I cannot build a field in Salesforce with Salesforce just right out of the box that says, how many times did a salesperson call this contact ever last month, last week, whatever? Can't do it. And so what we do, that's why we lean on all of these metrics that are people-focused, because we have contact records and we have lead records. What you need is a place to aggregate all of this data in one place, and I use the account. And so you need to be able to say on the account, how many people have we engaged? How many times on average did we engage those people? And there are a lot of metrics that fall out of this. So for example, you want to know when we're successful, when we set an outbound, how many people did we engage on average? How many calls and emails and gifts and whatever else did we log against that person? And so to do any of this, you essentially need either a data warehouse, which somebody said spreadsheets earlier. That's essentially like a poor man's data warehouse, right? Pulling a bunch of data into a third-party app. Or you need to aggregate all this data in one place in Salesforce. And Salesforce has some of the most powerful reporting on the market. It's hard to get all the data together. And so that's how, to answer your question, you can do away with all these questions around how do you relate all this stuff together? Yeah, put it together on the account object, which you can do yourselves. You don't have to buy something for this, but as you grow as an organization and as you log more and more and more records in Salesforce, off-the-shelf tools like Rollup Helper stop working because for every 1 million records that Rollup Helper scans in order to decide, like, for example, how many times did we call this person, every million records is 85 hours worth of runtime. So just for that stat, you're a week behind.
You might have mentioned this at the beginning, I apologize, but so you define outbound, so scenario, you do outbound, right?
Mm-hmm.
They then come to the website, download an ebook, and opportunity is generated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Still outbound, right?
So that is a strategic decision you need to make internally. But my feeling, and this is not gospel, you decide for yourself, but my feeling is I would rather my hardworking outbound reps get the occasional bluebird because somebody happened to come inbound around the time they went outbound than assume that it belongs to marketing.
So from a scale perspective, you look at activity occurred before, the marketing event happened.
So we have activation. So I have a date on which it was activated. Any opportunity that happens after that, before it's inactivated, they get credit for.
So based on your definition of activation, you stamp it on the account, say it's activated. Does it expire?
Yes.
90 days?
You got to decide that. So, all right, I am going to talk about the app a little bit because it speaks to this exactly. But the whole concept of the app is tracking activation. How many times has this account been activated over time? It generates a new record for every activation, and it has in the back-end settings where you say there's a cooling off period of X days after the last activity before it becomes inactive. It's rendered inactive, and now if 30 days after you stopped going outbound, somebody comes in and fills out a form, then you don't get credit. But if it's active, the SDR gets credit, in my opinion.
Thank you.
When you're setting the definition for the activation level or engaged, why might you be more or less restrictive around that? Why if I'm more restrictive around those definitions, what's the downstream result or the inverse of that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think the downstream effect is the more restrictive you are, the less likely your SDR is to get credit if it takes time for your outbound efforts to result in somebody coming inbound. It's all judgment calls. My default is 30 days. 30 days feels like enough time after the last email went out. So because everyone uses outreach, the last email probably goes out 50 days after this person even thought about the account, right? Because you have a long tail sequence. So really I'm giving them 80 days since they actually put any real effort into it. So I don't think there's any real problem with being more restrictive. 2 more minutes. All right, sweet. You want to dance?
Isn't that what we just did?
All right.
Can I get a warm round of applause for these guys? That was brilliant. Taft, Chris, if anyone wants to get a hold of you guys, how should they do so?
So for me, it's right here. Chris, because he works at a big public company, has to be a little careful.
Yeah,
LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn's best, and to clarify, Taft's one of my best friends. This is his thing. If you're interested in what he's doing, reach out to him. If you want to just talk shop, happy to speak with you about it.
There we go. So Chris Bryson, find him on LinkedIn if you'd like to talk. We built the first version of this system together a few years ago, so he can speak to it as well.
Thank you guys. One more, come on, let's give it up. This was amazing.